Tipping culture. It's getting out of control now. You gotta tip servers, Uber drivers. I swear I got a speeding ticket the other day and there was a place to add gratuity.
I'm not gonna tip you just because you turned the iPad around and I pushed the button, bro. Like,
Yep.
Tips are earned and companies should pay their people more so they don't have to worry about tips.
Okay, I've had it with what I see as a new trend of everyone wanting to be tipped all the time.
Everywhere you go, it's all built in, this tip, and then you feel like this, because I'm a huge believer in tipping.
What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new to my channel, welcome to my channel. My name is Toni Bryann, and in today's video, we'll be discussing tipping culture. Ooh, that was a mouthful. If you know, you know. Tipping culture has gotten increasingly out of hand. Everybody is expecting a tip, and it's to the point where it is shameful if you do not tip, even if you don't have the means. In today's video, we'll be discussing the origin of tipping, the expectation of tipping, and why tipping can actually be seen as bad. But before we get into today's video, I have not done my motivational quotes in a while. I noticed over time as I filmed that I just have forgotten to do so, and I honestly think it was a very productive aspect of the video before starting. So we're gonna get back into the swing of things, and we're gonna start off with the first quote. Today's quote of the day is, "I have faith that everything is working out for my highest good." Today's verse of the day is Proverbs chapter 10 verse 12, and it reads, "Hatred stirs up conflict, but love covers over all wrongs." And now let's give thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Colon Broom. Colon Broom has created an amazing dietary supplement that helps relieve constipation and cleanse your body. Now, constipation causes problems like bloating and indigestion. Colon Broom comes around to work as a prebiotic and nourish healthy gut bacteria. Through this, it promotes regular bowel movements, lowers the risk of diabetes by slowing down the absorption of sugar, and promotes healthy, good fiber. A healthy colon boosts your energy, improves your skin health, and will overall put you in an amazing mood. So if you guys know me, I am all about taste. I am not very keen with using products that don't taste good just because they're healthy. The Colon Broom powder I have is strawberry flavored, and it is not strong at all. It actually is tasty. I have now incorporated it in my daily supplement intake, and I have noticed a huge difference in my gut health. Previously, I was so bloated that I thought I was gaining weight, though I was taking the proper measures in order to maintain my health. The problem was I was just extremely constipated. With taking this dietary supplement, it has cleansed my colon and has my stomach at a place that I am comfortable and happy with. So if you're someone that struggles with indigestion, bloating, constipation, or you just want to maintain your colon health, definitely check out Colon Broom, and they are more than kind enough to provide my subscribers with a beautiful discount code. Use my code Bryann10 for 10% off your first or next Colon Broom purchase. And thank you so much, Colon Broom, for sponsoring this segment of today's video. And y'all, now let's get into the very much so toxic tipping culture.
Taking you in this moment.
Before we get into tipping culture, and I guess I should say the negative aspects of it, we have to start with foundation, and that is just a simple definition of what tipping is. According to Cambridge Dictionary, tipping is the act of giving an amount of money to someone who has provided a service. Today, specifically in America, there is an expectation of tipping regardless of what service was provided or lack thereof. Tipping culture is most prevalent, or should I say mandatory, in restaurants when it comes to waitresses, waiters, and bartenders. That is because the tips that customers give those bartenders, waiters, and waitresses, it is most likely the biggest compensation they're making from any type of pay from an employer. So like I just stated, tipping is most prevalent in restaurants and bartenders. Well, it was at one point. Over tipping has become a mandatory expectation in other fields of service. But before we get into these other fields of services, we need to start with the origin of tipping and where it came from. So tipping culture originated in medieval times in between a master-serf relationship. If you're unaware of what a serf is, I know history was a long time ago even for me, The serfs were the poorest of the peasant class. They were a type of slave, should I say. The masters or the lords owned the serfs that lived on their lands. Now, in order for the serfs to live on their lord/master's land, they had to work on that land to grow crops for their lord and themselves. Now, even with the immense amount of labor that these serfs were doing, they also had to pay rent on that land just to have a place to live. So you guys are probably asking, Toni, what does this have to do with tipping? I'm about to get into that right now. So the lords that owned the serfs, they would provide them with tips if they thought that the serfs did an exceptionally good job. But the money they gave them was basically equivalent to pennies today. So how did tipping then make its way into the US? Y'all, it had to do with a whole bunch of flexing. So back in the 1850s and 60s, wealthy Americans would go to Europe on vacation and they noticed that the Europeans would tip. Those wealthy Americans then brought it back to the US in order to seem more affluent. Initially, the majority of people in the United States were against tipping. They found it to be very classist. In their minds, they're like, how can poorer Americans be expected to also add on a tip to something that they already paid for? And that began the anti-tipping movement. The anti-tipping movement took place in the 1860s and it spread even into Europe. And clearly it had some sort of effect, at least for Europeans, because even today, tipping in Europe is seen as rude and it's not the expectation for dining. But clearly the same effect did not take place for Americans. And you guys will not even be shocked as to why it did not take heed for Americans. As always, it centers around slavery. So slavery was abolished in 1865, at least according to the American Constitution. However, the enslaved people that were released from slavery only had a very few options as to what they could do for work in order to live. Due to this, many people became sharecroppers. If you're unaware of what a sharecropper was, let's talk about the custom of sharecropping. So sharecropping was a specific type of farming where sharecroppers were renting a small portion of land from that collective landlord. The rent was paid at the end of the farming season from either a portion of the produced crops to the landowner or through the proceeds that the renters made from selling their crops. So this was a very laborious career path. So those that decided not to go down the sharecropping route, they were in other industries such as being a servant, a waiter, a barber, or railroad porters. These were kind of their only options for employment at the time. Now the railroad porters and the waiters would only get paid in tips or gratuity in exchange for the service they provided. Due to this, there was a spike of popularity in terms of tipping, but still there were a lot of people against it. And in 1915, 6 states banned tipping overall. And in some states like Georgia and Iowa, people who accepted tips could face jail time or fines. By 1926, these laws that were put in place to make tipping illegal were then overturned. They deemed it as unlawful. The Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 basically compensated everyone to have fair equal pay. In easier terms, this is where minimum wage came about. The bill provided a 40-cent per hour minimum wage and a 40-hour maximum work week. So that benefited every industry besides tipped workers. Employers of tipped workers were only required to pay them a rate that, when added with their tips, would equate the federal minimum wage. Today, the current federal minimum wage for tipped workers is just $2.13, while the minimum wage for everybody else is $7.25. And that's already very low. It needs to be a lot higher, especially in today's economy. The minimum wage is expected to increase to $9.50 as of July 1st, 2023, so in a few weeks, but still that is not enough in today's economy. Due to the minimum amount that these tipped workers are making from their employers, it is now the customer's responsibility to compensate for what they're not earning. And the amount that customers are expected to tip these workers has significantly increased over the past few decades. During the 1950s, people commonly tipped 10% in the restaurant industry, which I think is very fair. But by the 1970s and 1980s, that jumped up to 15%, which brings us today in 2023. People typically tip between 15 to 25%, with the average American tipping 21%. That is due to it being widely frowned upon to tip less than 20% of what you paid. Now, I strongly agree that people that work in the restaurant industry, anyone that is a server, a bartender, waiter, waitress, whichever, I do believe that they should be tipped. The only issue I have with tipping is the expectation of tipping a certain amount. Some people are not able to afford the dining experience along with being tipped. I know I've seen a lot of people say, well, if you can't afford the dining experience, you should not go out to eat.
if you can't afford to eat out, if you can't afford to tip people, eat at Taco Bell.
You guys do realize in today's economy, people aren't making what they should be making, especially with the increase of prices and everything. You're saying a family that's impoverished and can only tip 12% should not be allowed to go out to eat? That seems very ludicrous and classist in my opinion. These people should be tipped, but it should not be the customer's sole responsibility to compensate that person for a job that they asked for. It is the employer's job to pay their workers livable wages. Because guess what? The average customer is struggling as well. They're going out to restaurants and bars in order to just get through the week most of the time. Being bullied for low tipping should not be okay. Now, no tipping, that is a whole different story. These workers do need to be compensated for their time because they are doing a job, and unfortunately the system is against them. But everybody should be able to tip within their means, because tipping is just extra and it should not be the expectation for someone to tip a certain amount. Now, we all know in the restaurant industry it's just not fair to their workers, but let's get into all the other people, the extra add-ons that are actually getting paid minimum wage that are expecting tips from people. In 2020, there was a certain amount of appreciation for service workers due to them risking their lives to go and complete a job. People started tipping for things that they never tipped for before. So here's some stats that I found online. According to Square, before the panini began in February 2020, the share of remote transactions when tipping was 43.4%. In February 2023, the share was 74.5%, which means tipping has increased over 30% in just 3 years. You can go to Starbucks, you can go to Smoothie King, and people are expecting you to tip. When you're ordering your meal, you're not getting a service, you're just ordering whatever you want to order from the cashier. They will turn a kiosk around or a tablet, and it will always have a recommended percentage of tipping. And it has very specific numbers. It starts off with 18%, 20%, 22%, and in some cases 30%. 30% added onto your tab of expected pay. If I'm going to a fast food restaurant just to order my food from a cashier whose job it is to accept my order, I should not be expected to leave a tip due to them doing their job. They're not providing me a service, they're doing what they decided to do as their career path. It's to the point where tipping is now aggressively expected. Now, this just isn't in your local Chick-fil-A or your local Wendy's. It's now being expected in the beauty industry. When it comes to nail salons, getting your hair done, going to an esthetician, getting a massage. Before, tipping was just seen as something nice to do, but now they expect it, and these people are now bashing you guys for not leaving a generous amount of tip or not leaving a tip at all.
Okay, I've had it with what I see as a new trend of everyone wanting to be tipped all the time. So you're looking straight up at the person that you're tipping. So if you hit no tip, you're just a total fucking twat.
That's right.
But it just seems ridiculous.
I went to a bakery to get some cookies the other day. It's her job to put the 6 cookies in a box, ring me up. She spins the little checkout thing around, and there's a tip on it.
It's outrageous.
You even now have food delivery service workers expecting a huge tip when they decided to take that job. If I'm already ordering my food, and let me just say, y'all, DoorDash, Uber Eats, all of them places, they tax, okay? Your meal will go from $10 to $60 real quick, okay? So if I'm deciding to leave a tip, that's me being generous. It should not be the expectation. You now have these workers going online and judging people for not leaving them a more generous tip, or even touching and eating their food because they're angry they didn't get a tip that they wanted. Excuse me?
This Domino's pizza guy is really upset about his last delivery. What follows next is an epic meltdown.
5 minutes out there in the rain and no tip! No tip!
People losing it over lousy tips seems to be a growing trend during the pandemic.
This DoorDash customer only tipped $1? Let's see what he got at Arby's, huh? It's got the beef and cheddar and the crinkle fries. Oh man, that's my favorite. Thank you, $1 tip off.
This is not saying anything about payment. Already paid. It just says, it says zero. It says that you left nothing. As far as the tip? Yeah. I didn't tip. Can I have my food? Yeah, look at it.
Furious over the tip she got.
I need to speak to you. I don't think you realize
where they're coming from, so I need to speak to you.
Where what's coming from?
The driver who delivers for DoorDash was captured on the homeowner's Ring camera.
I drove 40 minutes, and it was extremely far, and I got it to you early. So I don't think you realize where you work from.
That's a 15, 20-minute drive.
It's not. You need to try to drive it. I just drove it. It's 40 minutes.
Well, we decided to check for ourselves. The restaurant was in Comac, New York. The house was in Smithtown. According to Google Maps, that's a 5.5-mile drive and should take only 12 minutes.
I think you need to adjust your tip to make it right.
So, what was the tip?
You gave an $8 tip.
What the hell are you looking for? I gave an $8.
Okay, I'm going to bring the food back. I'm going to bring the food back. Okay.
That's right, she took the food back.
Now let's get into the beauty industry. These girls are already angry as ever, okay? A lot of them be having attitudes. Their policies are astronomical. They have all these rules in place. They're overcharging. And then they expect to tip. Full sets at nail salons have gone from $25 to $100 plus for a simple design or a simple set. Now I understand today's economy is crazy. I get it. But you cannot expect everyone else that's also working and is also struggling in today's economy to give a tip along with already paying for their very expensive service. If I'm dropping $300 on a hairstyle, I should not be expected to give you 20% for a job that you were supposed to do. Hence why I don't get my nails done anymore. I do press-ons myself. I don't have them on right now, but I be doing press-ons because I don't have time to be paying $170 for just a simple set. Now I always tip whenever I get a pedicure or whenever I get my hair done, but I'm not tipping 18 to 20%. It's not happening. I'll give an extra $10 or $15 and that's just me being generous. I should not be expected to give you a tip along with already paying for a service that you provide. Now, if somebody wants to be generous and they want to pay you that extra 20%, that should just be a courtesy, not the expectation. So to that point of the aggressiveness of expecting tips, in a survey, 22% of people said that when they're presented with various suggested tip amounts, they feel pressure to tip more than they normally would. And as I stated previously, if someone wants to tip you, that's great. But if they can't because they honestly can only afford for the service you already provided, they should not be looked down upon or frowned upon. For nail techs, hairstylists, and cashiers, no, it is not necessary to tip them. Tipping should be seen as optional in those cases, and there should be no shaming involved when someone cannot do so or does not feel it deemed necessary to do so. Tipping is a courtesy and it should be seen as such, and that would cause so many more people to feel more willing and able to tip. Now let's get into how tipping may affect workers specifically in the restaurant industry. Tipped workers probably work the hardest. They're working endlessly and tirelessly just to make ends meet due to their employers not paying them livable wages. These workers are reliant on their tips, so they work on days where they know they'll make the most money, which is weekends, holidays, late nights, early mornings, and for a lucrative amount of hours. A lot of times these workers are either students or parents just trying to make ends meet. This causes them not to have any time to do anything else. For instance, students, they might not have time to get their homework done, study for that exam, develop a social life, hanging out with friends. And for parents, they're missing out on all these memories with their children because they have to work in order to provide a roof over their kids' heads. And not only that, a lot of the times these workers are dealing with really crappy customers. Restaurant industry service workers being reliant on tips puts customers at a certain pedestal, and they know that. Some customers will have some of the most obscene requests, disrespect these workers, are increasingly rude, and have some of the craziest demands. It's like they treat some service workers as if they're slaves. And honestly, some of these customers only behave like this as an excuse to give a low tip or not tip at all, which is just downright messed up. So for any customers out there that like to do this, just know it's very rude and it says more about your character than it says about the service workers. Now, if you're dealing with a waiter or waitress that is really being mean, or a bartender, because trust, I've dealt with that before, that's a different case scenario. But if they're just trying to do their jobs, you being so unruly is not helping them in their day when they're already dealing with a whole bunch. But y'all, that is the end of today's video. I, of course, want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. Please, let's make it clear, I'm not saying tipping should be abolished completely, but I do believe that there should not be a necessity of tipping due to employers and the government not feeling the need to pay these workers a livable wage. But like I said, I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you guys like this video, do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love and I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you all in my very next video. Love you guys. Bye. Mwah.
Taking you in this moment, come get get close like you own name. Read your aura, you want more of all this love, you'll be your name. Release all of your